Today, former Minnesota police officer Kim Potter took to the stand in her own defense. Potter is charged with 2 counts of manslaughter after she shot and killed 20-year-old Daunte Wright at a traffic stop last April, claiming she confused her gun for her taser.
We were struggling. We were trying to keep him from driving away. It just went chaotic. And then I remember yelling, "Taser, taser, taser," and nothing happened. And then he told me I shot him.
Potter testified that she reached for her taser because she feared for her fellow officer's safety. But as the prosecution pointed out, that is not what she said in an earlier interview with a psychologist who was a defense witness.
Do you see the portion where it explains, when asked by this examiner why she decided to draw her taser, Officer Potter states, "I don't have an answer. My brain said grab the taser." Do you recall that?
I don't recall it, but it's in his paperwork.
Closing arguments are scheduled to begin Monday. With me now, Melissa Murray, law professor at NYU and an MSNBC legal analyst, and Mark Claxton, retired NYPD detective and director of the Black Law Enforcement Alliance. Thank you both for being here. I have to start with you, Mark, because the idea that a trained police officer with more than 20 years on the force could not tell a taser from a Glock, to me, is so completely nonsensical that it makes no sense to me. These are the pictures of what the two firearms look like. They're different weights, they're different colors. This is her testimony. So let's just go into the training first. Let me play this real quick, and then I have a question for you. Here's the prosecution, who you might recognize from the Chauvin trial, Derek Chauvin trial. It's the same set of prosecutors, some of them, questioning Ms. Potter on her taser training. Here's that.
Part of the taser policy includes that all training should include performing reaction hand draws or cross draws to reduce the possibility of accidentally drawing and firing a firearm. That's part of the policy, right?
That's what it says.
And that's part of what you're trained to do, correct?
We didn't always we aren't always drawing our tasers from our holsters. A lot of times we were in plain clothes during training.
Okay, well, your policy that you're required to abide by, that you signed off on, requires that you perform reaction hand draws, true?
During the training, yes.
Mark Claxton, does any of this defense make sense to you?
Not at all. And it's no excuse for a professionally trained police officer and an experienced professionally trained police officer to confuse the taser for the firearm. That testimony and other testimony related to training that a professional police officer undergoes on a regular basis, she was very dismissive of a lot of the training. As a matter of fact, disdainful. She came across as really offended to even answer a question about training and those type of standards. And what should be pointed out is, just as in the Chauvin case, she's a field training officer. She's the one who is training the next generation of police officers how to do things correctly and properly, supposedly. Just like Chauvin, she was a field training officer and had a trainee along with her. A lot of her testimony, a lot of her positions, and just her demeanor clearly displays that there is a high level of culpability for criminal activity in regards to her.
And yet, Melissa, it is, again, a real question as to whether what seems like an open and shut case to the layman will really work out that way. I mean, she did the crying check. The jury is nearly all white. There's only one person of color on the jury. Check. Now, that doesn't always work out, because if you look at the Chauvin trial or you look at the trial of the men who murdered Ahmaud Arbery, it didn't work out for them quite that way to get that almost all white jury. But, you know, she gets up there and does sort of a sympathetic crying thing. And then you've got the burden of proof on the prosecutors to prove that she, acted with some deliberation. So what do you make of where we stand in terms of this trial?
Well, again, as you say, the burden is always on the state to prove the charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And the two charges here are manslaughter in the first degree and manslaughter in the second degree. And those are both homicide charges. Manslaughter in the first degree is essentially a killing, an intentional killing, but in the heat of passion. manslaughter in the second degree is an unintentional sort of negligent killing. And I think that goes to where the prosecutor was going today. Like, you should have known better and you didn't do better. That's negligence. But it is really an uphill battle. And as you say, the prosecutor has to convince this jury beyond a reasonable doubt. And here she is in a cardigan with a cross on a pendant and looking like a grandmother and crying. And I think, that may be very resonant with some of these jurors.
Do you think, Melissa, that this case was overcharged? I mean, there was the pressure because of the George Floyd situation and the charging. Do you think they might have hit too high with the charges and maybe they should have charged her with something easier to prove?
Well, that's always a question, I think, for the prosecution, and it was especially so here. As you note, the Chauvin trial was going on when this occurred, and so this was being charged against the backdrop of that trial, and there were people who were really calling for something to hold her accountable. There was of course, the initial reluctance of the chief of police to denounce or condemn her, and that led to some public outcry. So I think there really was a lot of public pressure to put a homicide charge on the table.
And Mark, what will be the message to other police if she does get off? Because one of the things that she said is, well, if she hadn't been training this other guy, she probably wouldn't have even pulled the man over. And then she ends up shooting and killing him and saying, oops, not my taser. What message does that send to law enforcement if she walks away a free woman?
It'll just reinforce the same message that law enforcement normally receives during these type of proceedings, and the justification for this toxic police culture that too often leads to these fatal encounters involving Black and brown people. It's a classic defense strategy. Ignore the pretextual stop, ignore the deviation from perhaps department policy or department directives saying, listen, in COVID, we don't necessarily need to focus on these registration or air freshener. Ignore that. Ignore the training failures. Ignore whether or not there was even a justification for using any level of force in this particular case. And instead, focus on the 2 seconds, if you will, where they pull the trigger, where they discharge a firearm, and decide whether or not the police officer was, quote unquote, justified. Never mind these negligent terms or reckless terms. We want you to say, was she sufficiently scared or startled enough to be justified?
Yeah, and then that comes down to, is she scared of this young Black man? And then it never really goes in the way that we think it's going to go. Melissa Murray, Mark Claxton, thank you both very much.
I'll let you motherfuckers think y'all run everything. Motherfucker. What? Motherfucker. You owe me some money, motherfucker. What you motherfuckers talking about? Motherfucker, I eat everything. Fuck, I'll chew his ass up, motherfucker. Motherfucker. You a smart motherfucker. English, motherfucker. Motherfucker. We're not gonna store the motherfucker. I'm on the motherfucker. I'm a mushroom cloud laying motherfucker. Ha. You're closed, motherfucker.